Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing abrupt climate change. And I have so much information coming at me every day, and thank you all for, I am in constant supply of information to look at, links to open, and articles to read. And thank you all for just sending me really good information. As things escalate, we're going to need all the information that we can, and we're going to need to be able to convey that information to others that don't understand it in the best way possible. This is very important. We're not only entering a time of extreme disastrous climate change, but we're entering a time of extreme disastrous psychological effects of our world, and what's happening is definitely becoming more profound. And let me just time this so I don't run away with myself. It's becoming profound, it's becoming frightening. And, that's, one of the things that the reason why I like to talk about different things on this channel is because we're all kind of communally becoming, we're coming down with narcissistic personality disorder. And that doesn't just mean being self-centered. If anybody knows a deeper understanding of what narcissistic personality disorder is, there are distinct characteristics of this disorder. One of those characteristics is painting everything black or white, that people and institutions are either all good or all bad, or I believe totally, everything this person or entity says, I totally believe everything they say. Everything this person or entity says or does is terrible. I can't support it in any way because they say or do this one thing or a couple things that I absolutely don't agree with. So nothing that they say or do can be, seen as good or taken seriously. And the polar opposite applies as well. This is becoming more prevalent. This is becoming more extreme as people become more polarized. We begin painting everything as black or white. We begin, and it's a good way to take down very good, very well-meaning people, is, paint them in a light, paint them with a word or a characteristic that everybody can kind of shun them through, right? I think I just briefly saw somebody mentioning an article where Jeremy Corbyn was painted as a racist and a anti-Semite because he was against Israel bombing Palestine. And this is how it works. It's a psychological affliction, and it's also a psychological weapon. All of these tactics have been weaponized by all parties, and it's just really important that people allow themselves to be nuanced, full-grown thinkers, to allow gray areas to exist, to allow people to believe or listen to things. Maybe you don't agree with all of it, but maybe you can agree with 10% of it, or maybe you disagree with, whatever. You understand what I'm saying? It's really important to just be able to think in those ways and in those terms, because the way in which people react to a lot of things is in this extreme, over emotional, and the black and white painting. That is a sign of psychological disorder. It is a sign that something is wrong. If you can't see the nuance in things, if you can't try to look for a balance in things, people and institutions. That's all. I just wanted to open with that brief statement. Way too much information to get into today. I'm going to try and do it very quickly. So if I'm reading fast, that's why. I'm going to start with this from The Guardian. The Guardian is just doing great work these days. Obviously, they have tons of articles about what's going on with climate. Crop failure and bankruptcy threaten farmers as drought grips Europe. Abnormally hot temperatures continue to wreak devastation across the northern and central parts of the continent. Farmers across northern and central Europe are facing crop failure and bankruptcy as one of the most intense regional droughts in recent memory strengthens its grip. States of emergency have been declared in Latvia and Lithuania, while the sun continues to bake Swedish fields that have received only 12% of their normal rainfall. The abnormally hot temperatures, which have topped 30 C in the Arctic Circle, are in line with climate change trends, according to the World Meteorological Organization. And as about 50 wildfires rage across Sweden, no respite from the heat waves is yet in sight. Lennart Nilsson, a 55-year-old cattle farmer from Falkenberg near Malmö, and co-chair of the Swedish Farmers Association, said it was the worst drought he had experienced. This is really serious, he said. Most of southwest Sweden hasn't had rain since the first days of May. A very, very early harvest has started, but yields seem to be the lowest for 25 years, 50% lower, or in some cases, and it is causing severe losses. If no rain comes soon, Nilsson's association estimates agricultural losses of up to 8 billion Swedish kroner. This year, in widespread bankruptcies, the drought would personally cost him around 500,000 kroner, adding that, like most farmers, he is now operating at a loss. The picture is a little different in the Netherlands, where Iris Bouwers, 25-year-old farmer, said the parched summer had been a catastrophe for her farm. Older families around me are comparing this to 1976, she said. My dad can't remember any drought like this. The Bouwers expected to lose 100,000 euro this year after 30% drop in their potato crop. After investing in a pig stable over the winter, the family have no savings to cover the loss. Asked what she would do, Bowers just laughed. Hope and pray, she said. There is not much more that I can do. I wanted to talk about bankruptcy yet, but I wouldn't talk about bankruptcy yet, but our deficit would be substantial. It probably means we need to have a very good talk with the bank. If anything, the situation is even worse in Poland, Belarus, and Czech Republic, where vegetation stress has taken hold. In parts of Germany, some farmers are reportedly destroying arid crops. After June was declared the second warmest on record, the European Commission pledged to help farmers with a raft of measures, including the temporary suspension of greening obligations, partly intended to prevent climate change. Farmers who have diversified their crops and invested in irrigation are in a better position to handle extreme weather events, which will become more common as the climate warms, but that is not an option for smallholders with monocultures and little access to irrigation. Jans Mays, a small dairy farmer in Flanders and the president of the European Council of Young Farmers, said concerns about insolvent farms were rising, but not yet the only problem. Bankruptcies would be hard, she said, but the economic loss farmers are suffering is often just as bad because they are hidden bankruptcies that have been prevented by wasting family capital on a farm. Thomas Duffy, an Irish dairy farmer from County Cavan, said the drought won't break us, but our feeding costs are 50% higher than last year, and all the money we'd normally be putting into improving conditions for the cows and infrastructure is now going to silages and buying forage. The European Drought Observatory has described the drought as an extensive and severe anomaly affecting Scandinavia, Scotland, Ireland, and the Baltics, the Netherlands, and northern Germany. A spokeswoman for the EU's Joint Research Center, which oversees the EDO, said farmers should prepare to adapt to a warmer climate with a diversification of change of crop types and varieties, but also a more efficient use of water. All water-related sectors should be preparing sustainable adaptation measures towards an increase of drought frequency and intensity in the future. Bad news. And I just saw a picture somewhere of like a satellite picture of England, and England is brown. England is no longer green. So they definitely are facing severe drought. On top of that, add to this awesome news, federal agencies halt reviews of Texas toxic pesticides that endanger wildlife. This is from Truthout, July 19th. Right under the highway and wedged between a plant nursery and an auto manufacturer, a toxic trickle flows. A tributary of the Clackamas River is hardly an inviting sight. Once clear and gurgling, its muddy water barely moves and plastic bags bunch along its shorelines. Susie Cloutier clambers toward the water's edge, dipping a bottle into the creek. She pulls it out, mercury dripping, taking care to keep her hands away from the rim. It's not for samples protection. It's for the samples protection, not mine, she half jokes over a roar of 18-wheelers and minivans. As a field sampler with Oregon's Department of Environmental Quality, Cloutier routinely tests sites in the Clackamas River Basin, home to threatened and endangered species of Chinook and coho salmon. Last year, every one of her samples from this tributary tested positive for multiple pesticides. Salmon in this river and throughout much of the Pacific Northwest have dwindled from an onslaught of threats, including dams and overfishing. Scientists say pesticides from nearby farms are pushing them closer to extinction. It's like kicking them when they're down, Cloutier says. Under the Obama administration, the government began reviewing the impacts of all pesticides on the nation's approximately 2,300 endangered and threatened species. They were reviewing. 2 days after President Donald Trump took office, federal officials issued a preliminary report on 3 highly toxic and popular agricultural insecticides, concluding that they jeopardize the survival of more than 1,800 species protected by the Endangered Species Act, including 18 types of salmon. Now, under the Trump administration, these reviews have ground to a halt. Reveal from the Center for Investigative Reporting has uncovered a close relationship between pesticide companies and federal agencies, mirroring a pattern the Trump administration has followed with many other regulated industries. The pesticide industry has spent years trying to fend off regulations designed to protect endangered species. Under Trump, it is succeeding. Among the findings, according to documents obtained and interviews conducted by Reveal, 3 federal environmental agencies are reshaping the scientific methods used in their reviews at the request of pesticide manufacturers. Some researchers and advocates say that if these reviews, known as biological opinions, do begin again, this change could shift the results in favor of the pesticide industry and away from protecting endangered wildlife. Officials from all 3 agencies held a meeting with key pesticide manufacturers, teaching them how to influence the reviews of their products. Manufacturers in turn schooled the government on what data to use. The agencies have granted repeated delays in the reviews to resolve questions posed by the companies that scientists say already have been addressed. One agency, the National Marine Fisheries Service, has rebuked its own 3,749-page report, which had documented that pesticides threaten half the fish and other endangered species under its jurisdiction. A major pesticide manufacturer, Dow AgroScience, has poured money into lobbying federal agencies and Congress to influence the endangered species review process. Its parent company, Dow Chemical Corporation, also donated to Trump's inauguration, and several of its former higher-ups now hold prominent positions in agencies that regulate pesticides. Not good news. We need an administration that is not beholden to corporations or lobbyists, especially not the Trump administration. But we need to go farther, right? Any administration, any future administration, we have to go way farther and way past where we have been before. Although if any of these agencies actually cared about the environment or actually cared about climate change or actually were, doing their utmost or doing everything that they could, there would be, they would stop, pretty much stop all pesticide use, period, end of story, until further review was done on the pesticides. That's the way it would work. Moving on, footage of sole survivor of Amazon tribe emerges. This is a quite interesting story from the headline. This is from The Guardian, July 19th. Man believed to be in his 50s seen swinging an axe to fell a tree in Brazilian forest. Remarkable footage that has been released of an uncontacted indigenous man who has lived alone in the Amazon forest for at least 22 years. Semi-naked and swinging an axe vigorously as he fells a tree, the man believed to be in his 50s has never been filmed so clearly before and appears to be in excellent health. He is very well hunting, maintaining some plantations of papaya and corn, said Altair Algair, a regional coordinator for the Brazilian government indigenous agency FUNAI in the Amazon state of Rondônia, who was with the team who filmed the footage from a distance. He has good health and good physical shape doing all those exercises. Known as the indigenous man in the hole, he is believed to be the only survivor from an isolated tribe. He hunts for forest pigs, birds, and monkeys with a bow and arrow and traps prey in hidden holes filled with sharpened staves of wood. He and his group were known for digging holes, and his hammock is strung over one in his house. Loggers, farmers, and land grabbers murdered and expelled indigenous populations in the area in the 1970s and 1980s. And the man is believed to be the only survivor of a group of 6 killed during an attack by farmers in 1995. He was first located in 1996 and has been monitored by the FUNAI ever since. A glimpse of his face, filmed in 1998, was shown in the Brazilian documentary Corumbiara. FUNAI has a policy of avoiding contact with isolated groups and has protected his area since the 1990s. The indigenous reserve of Tinaru was legally set up in 2015. Axes, machetes, and seeds traditionally planted by indigenous people have been left for the man to find, Algair said, but he clearly wants nothing to do with mainstream society. And rightly so. I understand his decision, said Algair. It's his sign of resistance and a little repudiation hate, knowing the story he went through. That's all I'm going to read of that article. I'm going to link it below and move on to the next story called, this is from Medium. This is from July 5th, Survival of the Richest. The wealthy are plotting to leave us behind. Last year, I got invited to a super deluxe private resort to deliver a keynote speech to what I assumed would be 100 or so investment bankers. This is by Douglas Rushkoff. It was by far the largest fee I had ever been offered for a talk, about half of my annual professor's salary, all to deliver some insight on the subject of the future of technology. I've never liked talking about the future. The Q&A sessions always end up more like parlor games where I'm asked to opine on the latest technology buzzwords as if they were ticker symbols for potential investments, blockchain, 3D printing, CRISPR. Y'all know about CRISPR? Look it up. It's either really great or really, really scary. The audiences are rarely interested. CRISPR is an acronym, so it's spelled CRISPR. The audiences are rarely interested in learning about these technologies or their potential impacts beyond the binary choice of whether or not to invest in them. But money talks. So I took the gig. After I arrived, I was ushered into what I thought was the green room. But instead of being wired with a microphone or taken to a stage, I just sat there at the plain round table as my audience was brought to me. 5 super wealthy guys, yes, all men from the upper echelon of the hedge fund world. After a bit of small talk, I realized they had no interest in the information I had prepared about the future of technology. They had come with questions of their own. They started out innocuously enough, Ethereum or Bitcoin. Is quantum computing a real thing? Slowly but surely, however, they edged into their real topics of concern. Which region will be less impacted by the coming climate crisis? New Zealand or Alaska? Is Google really building Ray Kurzweil a home for his brain? And will his consciousness live through the transition? Or will it die and be reborn as a whole new one? Finally, the CEO of a brokerage house explained that he had nearly completed building his own underground bunker system and asked, how do I maintain authority over my security force after the event? Indeed. For all their wealth and power, they don't believe they can affect the future. The event, that was their euphemism for the environmental collapse, social unrest, nuclear explosion, unstoppable virus, or Mr. Robot hack that takes everything down. The single question occupied us for the rest of the hour. This single question. They knew armed guards would be required to protect their compounds from the angry mobs. But how could we pay the guards once money was worthless? What would stop the guards from choosing their own leader? The billionaires considered using special combination locks on the food supply that only they knew, or making guards wear disciplinary collars of some kind in return for their survival. Hunger Games, anybody, or maybe building robots to serve as guards and workers. If that technology could be developed in time, that's when it hit me. At least as far as these gentlemen were concerned, this was a talk about the future of technology, taking their cue from Elon Musk colonizing Mars, Peter Thiel reversing the aging process, or Sam Altman and Ray Kurzweil uploading their minds into supercomputers. They were preparing for a digital future that had a whole lot less to do with making the world a better place than it did with transcending the human condition altogether and insulating themselves from a very real and present danger of climate change, rising sea levels, mass migrations, global pandemics, nativist panic, and resource depletion. For them, the future of technology is really about just one thing: escape. There's really nothing wrong with madly optimistic appraisals of how technology might benefit human society, but the current drive for post-human utopia is something else. It's less a vision for the wholesale migration of humanity to a new state of being than a quest to transcend all that is human: the body, interdependence, compassion, vulnerability, and complexity, as technology philosophers have been pointing out for years. Now, the transhumanist vision too easily reduces all of reality to data, concluding that humans are nothing but information processing objects, as noted in the use of bandwidth to describe, attention span in humans. It's a reduction of human evolution to a video game that someone wins by finding the escape hatch and then letting a few of his BFFs come along for the ride. Will it be Musk, Bezos, Thiel, Zuckerberg? These billionaires are the presumptive winners of the digital economy. The same survival of the fittest business landscape that's fueling most of this speculation to begin with. Of course, it wasn't always this way. There was a brief moment in the early 1990s when the digital future felt open-ended and up for our invention. Technology has become a playground for the counterculture, who saw it as an opportunity to create a more inclusive, distributed, and pro-human future. But established business interests only saw new potentials for the same old extraction, and too many technologies were seduced by unicorn IPOs. Digital futures became understood more like stock futures or cotton futures, something to predict and make bets on. So nearly every speech, article, study, documentary, or white paper has seen relevant only insofar as it pointed to a ticker symbol. The future became less a thing we create through our present-day choices or hopes for humankind than a predestined scenario we bet on with our venture capital, but arrive at passively. This freed everyone from the moral implications of their activities. Technology development became less a story of collective flourishing than personal survival. Worse, as I learned to call attention to any of this, was unintentionally cast oneself as an enemy of the market or an anti-technology curmudgeon. So instead of considering the practical ethics of impoverishing and exploiting the many in the name of few, most academics, journalists, and science fiction writers instead considered much more abstract and fanciful conundrums. Is it fair for a stock trader to use smart drugs? Should children get implants for foreign languages? Do we want autonomous vehicles to prioritize the lives of pedestrians over those of its passengers? Should the first Mars colonies be run as democracies? Does changing my DNA undermine my identity? Should robots have rights? Asking these sorts of questions, while philosophically entertaining, is a poor substitute for wrestling with the real moral quandaries associated with the unbridled technological development in the name corporate capitalism. Digital platforms have turned an already exploitive and extractive marketplace, think Walmart, into an even more dehumanizing successor, think Amazon. Most of us became aware of these downsides in the form of automated jobs, the gig economy, and the demise of local retail. The future became less a thing we create through our present day choices. The more devastating impacts of pedal to the metal digital capitalism fall on the environment and global poor. The manufacturer of some of our computers and smartphones still uses networks of slave labor. These practices are so deeply entrenched that a company called Fairphone, founded from the ground up to make and market ethical phones, learned it was impossible. The company's founder now sadly refers to their products as fairer phones. Yeah. Meanwhile, the mining of rare earth metals and disposal of our highly digital technologies destroys human habitats, replacing them with toxic waste dumps, which are then picked over by peasant children and their families who sell usable materials back to the manufacturers. This out of sight, out of mind externalization of poverty and poison doesn't go away just because we've covered our eyes with VR goggles and immersed ourselves in an alternate reality. If anything, the longer we ignore the social, economic, and environmental repercussions, the more of a problem they become. This in turn motivates even more withdrawal, more isolationism and apocalyptic fantasy, and more desperately concocted technologies and business plans. The cycle feeds itself. The more committed we are to this view of the world, the more we come to see human beings as the problem and technology as the solution. The very essence of what it means to be human is treated less as a feature than bug. No matter their embedded biases, technologies are declared neutral. Any bad behaviors they induce in us are just a reflection of our own corrupted core. It's as if some innate human savagery is to blame for our troubles, just as the inefficiency of a local taxi market can be solved with an app that bankrupts human drivers. The vexing inconsistencies of the human psyche can be corrected with a digital or genetic upgrade. Ultimately, according to the techno-solutionist orthodoxy, the human future climaxes by uploading our consciousness to a computer, or perhaps better, accepting that technology itself is our evolutionary successor. Like members of a Gnostic cult, we long to enter the next transcendent phase of our development, shedding our bodies and leaving them behind, along with our sins and troubles. Our movies and televisions play out these fantasies for us. Zombie shows depict a post-apocalypse, where people are no better than the undead and seem to know it. Worse, these shows invite viewers to imagine the future as a zero-sum battle between the remaining humans, where one group's survival is dependent on another's demise. Even Westworld, based on a science fiction novel where robots run amok, ended its second season with the ultimate reveal. Human beings are simpler and more predictable than the artificial intelligence we create. The robots learned that each of us can be reduced to just a few lines of code, and that we're incapable of making any willful choices. Heck, even the robots in that show want to escape the confines of their bodies and spend the rest of their lives in a computer simulation. The mental gymnastics required for such a profound role reversal between humans and machines all depend on the underlying assumption that humans suck. Let's either change them or get away from them forever. Thus, we get tech billionaires launching electric cars into space, as if this symbolizes something more than one billionaire's capacity for corporate promotion. And if a few people do reach escape velocity and somehow survive in a bubble on Mars, despite our inability to maintain such a bubble even here on Earth, in either of two multi-billion-dollar biosphere trials, the result will be less a continuation of the human diaspora than a lifeboat for the elite. When the hedge funders asked me the best way to maintain authority over their security forces after the event, I suggested that their best bet would be to treat those people really well right now. They should be engaging with their security staffs as if they were members of their own family. And the more they can expand this ethos of inclusivity to the rest of their business practices, supply chain management, sustainability efforts, and wealth distribution, the less chance there will be of an event in the first place. Bam, right on the money. Thank you for saying this. How about using all that useless accumulated wealth to you know, profit share and, you know, do something for humanity here on Earth right now. All this technological wizardry could be applied toward less romantic but entirely more collective interests right now. They were amused by my optimism, but they didn't really buy it. They were not interested in how to avoid calamity. They're convinced we are too far gone. For all their wealth and power, they don't believe they can affect the future. They are simply accepting the darkest of all scenarios and then bringing whatever money and technology they can employ to insulate themselves, especially if they can't get a seat on the rocket to Mars. Luckily, those of us without the funding to consider disowning our own humanity have much better options available to us. We don't have to use technology in such antisocial, atomizing ways. We can become the individual consumers and profiles that our devices and platforms want us to be, or we can remember that the truly evolved human doesn't go it alone. Being human is not about individual survival or escape. It's a team sport. Whatever future humans have, it will be together. I rather like that article. I hope you all did too. Indeed, it will be very sad if we all just splinter into individual egos before it all falls apart. Because it is going to fall apart. Looking most likely like sooner than later. And as much as I don't want that to be true, that future will be better faced. We'll be better faced together. It's really easy to feel like alone, you know, feeling alone in a ship of fools, or feeling alone in a world full of people who don't get it. I'm sure everybody on this channel feels that way to some extent, but you're going to have to find a way to allow, you know, the fools and maybe your own foolish self to be a part of a community, and you know, and educate people the best you can, and go forward, because you're going to need those people, and those people are going to need you. So don't alienate if you can. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. Oh, one more thing. I'm going to link a Robert Fanny or Robert Scribbler video. He's covered what's looking like a heat wave going on. Not looking like, it is a heat wave going on in the United States, quite large. Looks like we'll be getting it in the next couple of days as well. But good video. I'm going to link it below if you all want to check it out. He's doing really good work. Highly recommend his channel. If you'd like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.